the viewpoint of conventional medicine is pure materialism. There is nothing spiritual anymore, nothing. It is totally eradicated in conventional medical practice. The human being is not viewed as spiritual. You are a collection of cells and nothing more. What anthroposophical medicine does is it allows for the physician specifically to go much deeper into understanding the patient and the human being, and as we all know, the spiritual nature of the human being, because that really, it plays a very deep and very fundamental role in how you're going to interact with the patient and how you're going to try and treat them. So the treatment doesn't become, let me fix the disease or get rid of the disease or view it only as something that you need to kind of just give a drug and suppress and hope that it gets right. You take into account many, many different factors that allow you to help that person bear the burden of the illness, not only as an illness, but as something that is deeply connected to many parts of what they are.
Welcome to Anthroposophical Conversations, the podcast where we explore the transformative teachings of Rudolf Steiner and engage in insightful discussions with individuals studying anthroposophy.
We sat down with Dr. Christopher Nicolaou. He has a keen interest in anthroposophy and the works of Rudolf Steiner, a love which was kindled through his Waldorf education. Christopher has recently qualified as a medical doctor from the University of London and wishes to one day use anthroposophical medicine to directly affect and change his patients' lives and impart as much of the teachings of anthroposophy to the world in a practical, relatable, and accessible way.
Welcome, Christopher. It's so great to get to share some time with you today.
Thank you very much.
So I wanted to start by just trying to understand the story of how you came to find anthroposophy.
Luckily for me, I wouldn't say I found it, but I was educated in the Waldorf school, and so I was in the system from a very early age, whether I knew that or not. And I think as time progressed, I was a lot more interested, I think, than my classmates and people around me in the way the education system was being taught. I was really interested in maybe not exactly how it was taught, but I was really taken in by the myths and legends that we were being told, the stories. I found them really, really interesting. And a seed of real awe and curiosity for the world, and especially for human beings, for man himself, was kind of sparked in me. And because of that interest, I think I was about grade 8, grade 9, I started looking at Rudolf Steiner and reading Rudolf Steiner, which at that age, it was more looking up to someone who you could follow the ideals of. I wouldn't say I was specifically an anthroposophist, because I don't think I was really, other than reading a few things that I found really interesting, I don't think I was really practicing anything that would, I would call myself an anthroposophist. But slowly, as time progressed, I gained a bigger interest in it. And in my grade 11 project, I focused a lot on music. I was very interested in music and the anthroposophical take on music. And that's how I came to anthroposophy. But I always felt a very deep resonance for the movement and Rudolf Steiner's teachings. I didn't particularly, how can I put it? Even now, I didn't join a society as such, or become really, involved in that part of it. I was more, and am still more involved in trying to understand it myself. But, slowly, I think as time goes on, it's quite important to start sharing it with other anthroposophists and see their perspective, people who understand it better. So yeah, that's how I came to anthroposophy. I was very lucky from, I think, grade 1 until grade 12, I was in the Waldorf school, and as time progressed, I grew into it. Yeah.
Great. And then I know when I first met you, it was through the music. You did a very interesting talk about that, but you've since actually qualified as a medical doctor. So how did that journey go? How come you now into medicine?
Well, like I said, I had always been and still am very interested in man as in human beings. It was music for me. I never grew up as a musician. My family wasn't, and how do I put it? My family wasn't particularly anthroposophical. I come from a Greek background. My dad's an accountant, my mom's a teacher, but they gave me the space to explore that. And music I wasn't interested in music again as a musician. I was more interested in what music did to the human being on a deeper level. That's what I was interested in, because I didn't grow up playing piano from 7 years old and conducting, which you need to do if you want to be a really good classical musician, because it's an incredibly perfected art, and you really need to have spent a lot of time if you want to progress as a conductor or a pianist. So I was never interested in being that. I was more interested in understanding what music did to human beings, why we felt the way we did. What did the composers really want to impart? What did Beethoven, what were the messages, and why did I feel the way I felt and do feel when I listened to that music? What were the stories behind it? And music is incredibly complex. It's, I think, the most complex thing, because you utilizing a deeply creative side with a very very concrete laws, and you have to put these together, and you're composing for 80 instruments. So all of that really fascinated me, but at the center of it was still always the human being. And that's why, and from a very young age, I knew that my next inevitable step would be to go into medicine, whether it was homeopathy or anthroposophical medicine. I knew that that's what I wanted to do. So it wasn't, it may seem like a jump from the outside to other people, but it wasn't for me, because from grade 8, I knew I wanted to become a doctor. I had met quite an interesting man who, I wouldn't say was an anthroposophical doctor, but he was definitely a very advanced man, for lack of a better word, very, very spiritually knowledgeable. He knew Rudolf Steiner, and he inspired me. And I said, that's what I want to be. And so from music, even during music, I knew this is what I was going to do. And I started studying at UJ, which was a homeopathic degree. And I realized that if I really wanted to do what I wanted to do and fundamentally change people's lives in an impactful way, I had to go into conventional medicine, because the world we live in now, unfortunately or fortunately, for whatever reason, it doesn't really matter. You need that. You need that authority as a medical doctor, so that when you do implement different therapies, and like anthroposophical medicine, you come from a place where you understand the physical and the scientific as well as the spiritual. You have to blend the two. It can't be one or the other, because I see that quite a lot now. But anyway, that's why I shifted. For me, it wasn't a shift, because both were inspired by the interest in understanding what we are as human beings. And I think medicine gives you a very, very good foundation to move into that. And medicine and music are not different. People think it's very different, but the body is a system, and so is music, and everything's a pattern. When you look at a human being, when you're doing a medical examination history, when you're trying to intuit what it is that what illness they have, but more than just the illness, what their story is, you're working with a very deep, connection. And that's the same with music. There's no difference. And on a more superficial level, reading the notes on an orchestral piece, the monograph, compared to reading lab results, it's all systems. So it's seeing the patterns, and everything is interconnected. It's not separate. It's, I find it that the two go together really, really well. Yeah.
Great. And then so you said, like, you realized you needed to understand what's called conventional medicine.
Yes.
That's the term. And from there, from what I've learned about anthroposophical medicine, is they do work together. You need them both, kind of thing. So maybe you can just help us understand, what is the distinction? How does anthroposophical medicine differ and or complement conventional medicine?
Well, conventional medicine, the viewpoint of conventional medicine is pure materialism. There is nothing spiritual anymore, nothing. It is totally eradicated in conventional medical practice. The human being is not viewed as spiritual. You are a collection of cells and nothing more, nothing more. No nutrition, no understanding of what it can be, why someone may have a disease, what factors they have. We understand it, but it's only materialistic. We try and understand what toxins they were exposed to, etc., but everything is material. It's not, nothing goes deeper into what a human being is, So having said that, however, it's still a very powerful form of, how can I put it? It's still a very powerful form of medicine, but it only remains in the physical, and everything that is done is to manipulate the physical body. And being an anthroposophist and knowing anthroposophy, as all anthroposophists know, you can't affect the physical body without affecting the spiritual, And so conventional medicine always falls short. It always falls short. It doesn't ever quite reach what it wants to reach because it doesn't take into account anything more than the physical. I'm not speaking about things like trauma or surgeries or acute medicine. At times like that, it's it's the best thing that you can have. If you need your heart valve replaced, they can do surgery and do that. For me, that's incredibly fascinating and amazing that you can put a human being down for 13 hours, replace a heart valve, and they wake up and have 20 years more of life. That is fascinating and really interesting. So we can't say that, which a lot of alternative therapies like to do, that conventional medicine is bad and they only view this, and yes, we know that it's deeply material, but it's the time we live in, What anthroposophical medicine does is it allows for the physician specifically to go much deeper into understanding the patient and the human being, and as we all know, the spiritual nature of the human being, because that really, it plays a very deep and very fundamental role in how you're going to interact with the patient and how you're going to try and treat them. So the treatment doesn't become, let me fix the disease or get rid of the disease, or view it only as something that you need to kind of just give a drug and suppress and hope that it gets right. You take into account many, many different factors that allow you to help that person bear the burden of the illness, not only as an illness, but as something that is deeply connected to many parts of what they are, the karmic and the future karma that they will have to, continue with, try and understand where it has come from, and not only, like I said, get rid of, but help them understand and deal with what they have in a much more holistic way, because you've viewed them, you've seen the patient as a spiritual being rather than just a physical collection of cells, which in the end, as a physician, really helps you connect with the patient and help them on a much deeper level. This is more my experience. I don't want to repeat what we can read, on the internet or even in what Rudolf Steiner has said. I'm trying to think of how I view it, and then so that there's something different imparted. But like I said, I haven't essentially practiced long enough to know exactly how I would approach it. But in 5 or 10 years' time, when I've delved deeper into it, I can give a much better answer. But for me, that's at this point in time, as a beginner, at the start of my journey as an anthroposophical doctor, that's how I view it. But I haven't had the experience yet, which, yeah.
But it sounds like it sounds like that is then what has attracted you to this field, is your interest in the human being first, and then exactly. How to help them experience more health.
Exactly.
So are there any principles that are worth just bearing in mind then? Because I know you mentioned when you spoke about conventional that it's so materialistic, like nutrition. Nutrition doesn't seem to come in much in today's world. So.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Again, like I must clarify that because I haven't practiced, and I must be honest, I would like to study far more in depth the direct principles of anthroposophical medicine. And now that I've finished, I have the chance, because it was very difficult in medical school. I would get quite how can I put it, despondent studying anthroposophical medicine, which was like, oh, this is what I really want to do, and then having to go back and do the conventional stuff. So I kind of separated it. But so far, and from what I understand, again, like I said, the principle has to be, the core principles is seeing the human being as a spiritual being. That is the fundamental part of anthroposophical medicine. And from that, the principles of the medicine grow out of, So, you will take into account many different things in their life. And in terms of treatments, for instance, we know that the human being has got all the minerals of the physical world. And so treating the human being is not something that you take a compound outside, but you can use what exists in the natural world to heal the human being, because they interconnect with each other. In terms of diet or nutrition, which we lack. We live in a world now where so much of the food we eat is totally destroyed from the farming methods, the way they treat the animals. I don't think, from what I've read, Rudolf Steiner gave specific guidelines for nutrition, but he gave ideas, like, for instance, eating a plant and vegetarian diets would assist someone in their spiritual development far more than someone eating meat, because in the way he described it, is meat kind of closes the human being to very specific and set ways of thinking. It doesn't allow the different spiritual forces to implement what they need to implement with the food that they eat, whereas eating plants or eating a vegetarian-based or plant-based diet allows for the spiritual forces in the human being to become far more active, and far more broad, and not be so deeply attached to the physical body, to kind of come out and expand beyond the confines of physical life that we often feel, So things like that, are testament to the principles of anthroposophical medicine. But I'm hesitant to say that I know these are what they are, because I would personally like to study them a lot better and in a lot more depth, and come to a realization of them for myself, because as I said, we can all read about them, but I would like to one day be able to impart how I've realized it and implemented it in my practice as a doctor. But as I said, I'm at the start of the journey, and we'll see how it goes.
That's great. I think we'll have to just meet again in 5-10 years and have another follow-up conversation. But I think what I'm gaining and from our interactions and our conversations around this is that, and maybe it's just something like even for your own health, like, and anything you can share with us. For me, what I'm gaining is, for me to be more healthy in this world, is to see myself as more than just a body.
Of course,
well, I know that, but it's to engage with, how do I explain it? So I suppose the question is, what can we take from the anthroposophical medical approach that would help us have general healthier well-being? Because I think they also touch a lot on the mental and emotional side, and even your history. So I know you spoke about karma and that, but like biography. There's so much more to us that brings this whole mind, body, emotion system together to allows us to then engage with the world. That we can be at a different choice point in relation to our health. Going forward.
So essentially, you're asking, how do you use anthroposophical medicine to maintain and assist your health?
Yes, I suppose that's what I'm asking.
And the mental and the emotional. I mean, that's a very in-depth and complicated question, and I'm not too sure of the answer, because I'm also discovering it myself, but I think it's important for us, and I say this because I know what it feels like when I don't do it, to connect with all the potential levels we have within ourselves as human beings. I think, especially in the world we live in now, it's so easy to get caught in a very habitual way of living. We are really formed and by deep patterns of habit, and those habits deeply confine us to a very small part of who we are. And I wouldn't say this is anthroposophical medicine specifically, but this is anthroposophy as a whole. By engaging in the parts of ourselves, like the creative process. So if, being an artist or playing music or practicing anything that is creative draws certain spiritual forces within us. By doing specific meditations, we slowly move away from the confines of our habits and our physical life and the world and the influence of the world into other potentials that allow us to start broadening our spiritual development. That's what I find anthroposophical medicine and anthroposophy as a whole does for me, because it was a very difficult time studying medicine during COVID. It's very, very easy, and even now, to be a pessimist, to be nihilistic, to go into a deep state of darkness and hatred for everything. It's very easy. I wish I could say it's not, but it's easy, because we don't live in a time where reverence for the world and awe and kindness and love for each other is really occurring. It is occurring between us as human beings on, how we interact with each other, but overall the energy, the way that we exist is not like that anymore. So that's how I would say you would use anthroposophical medicine to maintain health, because it goes beyond just health. Yes, it's all very well to eat a good diet and to exercise, but if you're not going to use the tools of, for instance, like the meditation, if you're not going to reflect on yourself as a human being, if you're not going to use the teachings, if you're not going to implement, the questions that you need to it doesn't matter what we do with the physical body. In the end, you haven't explored the potentials you have as a human being in this life. And really, at a very basic level, I think we're given this life as an opportunity and the body as a tool to evolve the spiritual parts of ourselves. And that, for me, is what is being rejected in the world. And that's what anthroposophical medicine and anthroposophy needs to, that's what we need to use in order to combat that. So it's the question is very complicated, and I've given a very, very simple answer. But again, I would need to have my own experiences and see my own patients, and within myself, see how implementing those things contributes to health. But I can tell you from direct experience now and through my own realizations that if that is not implemented in the age that we live in, it is a very easy thing to move into to feel as if you're going backwards and into a dark space. So for me, that's fundamental, to implement the teachings and to come to realize them for yourself and do the correct practices and move away from the habits, and probably the habits that have been formed by past karmic lives and habits formed by the family that you're born into. Because I personally can see that for myself. I know what may be my habits and what may be something passed on from my family, and by identifying that, you can move away from that, and in that you find freedom. So I think that's fundamental, because if not, that's the stage, that's where I said before, we're at a very dangerous time. If this is not implemented, I don't know where we will be, because I've experienced that darkness myself, and it's a very scary place to be in, Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Because I know you just touched on it, but I want to see if there's anything else you'd like to add about that from your own experience. As you said, having been studying and working as a medical doctor through the COVID and the lockdowns and all that, one of the questions I had for you is, how do you see the future of anthroposophical medicine evolving, and what potential impact it can have on our health system as a whole? And I suppose the bigger question behind it is why? Why is it so important that we remember that there's more to medicine than just, as you're saying, the very physical, materialistic side of it?
I think that question can be implemented to all parts of life. COVID itself wasn't the problem for me. It wasn't the disease that was the problem. It was what was being done by the governments and the organizations that we had created in our world. That, for me, was what was so scary, and something deeply, deeply dark and very, very evil, in my opinion, entered the world through COVID. Something that I think hasn't left. A very dark shadow has come over the world. Medicine was used, as the carrier of this darkness, and all forms of freedom and thought and understanding was totally destroyed and disseminated. And it's carrying on, and it's all in the name of science, and it's all in the name of a fake type of truth, and it's so deeply disconcerting that this exists, because it feels almost as if you're thrown in the ocean in a wave, and you don't know where up is up and you don't know where down is. You have no idea. You've lost all bearing. And I think this shadow has slowly and is choking human beings' connection, even the small connection that human beings have had to the spiritual world. And because of this, and because of that deep, deep darkness, which I think has changed. I can't remember, before COVID, yes, things were difficult, and maybe even 20, 30 years ago, but there was still a light that you could play with and feel. And I have a sense that something's happened, and I don't know what it is, and I can't explain it. But I saw it in medicine, and I saw it in how my colleagues reacted, and how doctors reacted, and how the medical field reacted, and how deeply corrupt it already is. So that's just a brief intro to say that because of that, anthroposophical medicine is far more important now than it ever was before. Because if we lose any type of connection to the spiritual, and this goes into all parts of life, but now that we're talking about medicine, and because medicine is so directly linked to the human being and so directly linked to very deeply vulnerable states of the human being when the human being is at their worst, anthroposophical medicine has to come in now more than ever before, because if we don't, I don't know what will happen to human beings. I don't know what will happen to the world. I don't know, because as I said to you, the experience of the darkness is so deep and I saw it and felt it so much that I can't imagine that we would get out of it if we don't implement the truth that is anthroposophical medicine, and to really take the human being away from this darkness and back into the light and back into understanding and back into a deep spiritual connection with themselves and the world and with the spiritual world beyond. That's really, I think, what needs to be done now. In terms of the future, I don't know what the future will be, because I've always had a sense that it doesn't help anymore to have anthroposophy only in anthroposophical circles. It doesn't help for me to treat parents at a Waldorf school only anymore. It doesn't help. We have to move beyond these systems, because if not, then we will be confined to very small parts of society that in the end may slowly become smaller and smaller. And anthroposophy and anthroposophical medicine has to become something that is implemented on a much broader scale. And it's a very difficult thing to do, because I don't see that you could fight the system we're in. I think, personally, what I would like to do is almost work from within the system, understanding the principles, studying the principles, and not speak about it, almost to the point where it's only you and the patient. And in that interaction, you implement those teachings and you impart something to that soul that they can take from there and continue in their life. I work now in the NHS, and it's very difficult. I can't treat anthroposophically at all. I can't give a specific remedy. No, I can't. But I can, in my interaction with a human being, do something with them that they don't need to know about, and in that way I can practice anthroposophy away from people who understand it, so that I can spread it maybe a little bit deeper, and maybe spread it a little bit to the doctors that I work with, and slowly spread the light. Of course, one day my ultimate aim will be to have my own practice, and in that practice I would like to I would be able to have a lot more freedom. But I think that's the aim. That, for me, needs to be the goal of anthroposophy. It needs to move into the world in a much more substantive way. If you're an accountant and can work in one of these big companies, work in that company and practice those principles. It doesn't help to just be at the, in a Waldorf school or in the Goetheanum. It doesn't help anymore. And I say this with the deepest respect for people who do work there, because I'm not trying to diminish it, but I'm trying to say that I feel the darkness is so dark that now it's really important we carry the light much deeper into the world, rather than, confine it. And in that way, I think anthroposophical medicine will grow, for sure. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
So that's my opinion, and that's how I view it at this point in time. Yeah.
And I really love that, because what I hear you saying is that we need to be the light.
Yes,
by living, by literally operating, and in the way we engage with the world. Doesn't matter which arena we're in,
yes.
Whether we at home with the family, or, as you say, in the corporate world or the medical world,
Exactly.
But in the greater world, as we engage with humanity out there, is to remember that we're all humans and come from that place.
Exactly. It's a very
we are the light. Yeah.
It has to be. It can't be any other way, because we're all part of this world. We're all human beings together. We may have a better understanding, or we do have a better understanding of the human being and spiritual worlds, but vast majority don't. And we need to connect with them and help them. We really do, because people are essentially good. People are really, really good. And we need to assist them, because I think people are getting disillusioned. And I think, as a doctor, one of the most difficult things to do is practice not even as a doctor, but a very difficult thing to do is practice love for other human beings. As I said to you, it's very easy not to practice love. But if a doctor can practice love, then every patient will be a new world for him, and it won't be about just the medicine. I've worked in hospitals now in America, in England, in South Africa, in Cyprus, and a common theme is the disinterest that doctors have in their patients. That's one thing I can see in all countries. There's no more interest in the human being. There's no more interest in the patient. There's almost no interest in the medicine. It's almost, I don't know what it is anymore, So that, for instance, that ability to love your fellow human beings will bring compassion and empathy, and in that way you spread the light. And if I don't know how we would do that, I find it quite natural, but it is difficult. But in learning how to do that more and more for myself, I will learn to love medicine and learn how to love, my fellow human beings. And in that way, I would spread much more light, rather than just saying, take this or take that remedy and say that, that's anthroposophy. I think the anthroposophy is in that connection I have with a human being. And that's more important now than anything than before, in my opinion. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
So if anyone would like to talk to you more about this or get in touch or support you in this journey going forward, how would they get a hold of you?
Yes, you can email me, and you can contact me on WhatsApp. My email is christoforos@gmail.com, XRISTOPHOROS.Nicolaou, NICOLAOU@gmail.com. I'm sure we can put it in the link to the podcast.
I'll put it in the show notes.
And my WhatsApp number, and you can contact me. Yeah.
Great. Well, maybe just in closing, just if there's anything else you want to say, and you may have covered this already, but maybe you want to add anything to it. I always like to end off with this question: is like, from this place of being informed by anthroposophy, what do you see as our task for us as human beings going into the future?
Yeah, like I said, I think at this point in time, it is to just, as best we can, truly realize the teachings that we have the great honor of being exposed to, and really, really deeply realize them for ourselves, and not superficially, but really go deep, and in that knowledge and in that depth, move with love and light into the world, because that, I think, is the most important thing to do now, and that's the task, I think, for anthroposophy. I don't want it to be a very complicated answer, because I think we can get lost in that, in the complicated ideas. But I think that's the basis now, and to actually, like I said, most importantly, in my opinion, to to carry that core, but to spread it far more deeply into the everyday world that we live in the corporate, in the government, and in the medical, in the agriculture, in all parts, and spread that knowledge, even if it is quietly, because if not, I don't know what will happen. I don't know what will happen.
Thank you for that. Thank you for the reminder that it starts with us,
yes,
and how we engage with the rest of the world. This has been Anthroposophical Conversations with me, Talana Simpson. Please support our show and help us to grow it by subscribing to one of our channels and sharing an episode with friends. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for joining us on this insightful adventure. We look forward to welcoming you to Anthroposophical Conversations where together we will unlock timeless wisdom and discover new horizons of understanding. Stay tuned for our upcoming episodes as we unravel the secrets of the human experience and delve into the extraordinary world of Rudolf Steiner's anthroposophy.